This episode of the podcast, episode 2, by the way, is sponsored in part by nobody. Again, because I am a lowly YouTuber that's just starting out, and this is a shit show. I'm currently recording from, I don't know, my fucking truck. Um, and, that's how, that's how bad this is. And how unprofessional I am, because I could record in my house, right? I really could, but I feel like I'm more at home in my truck than I am in my own house sometimes. So here I am in the truck recording, and this is why nobody's going to sponsor this podcast anytime soon, because it's completely unprofessional. But it is raw, and I'm very proud of that, because what you see is what you get with me. What you hear is what you get with me. So if somebody wants to sponsor this podcast, and God, I hope you don't. I really hope you don't. God, I won't bring you any business, any real business. I won't bring you. Like, people are gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go fucking buy Dr. Carver's shave butter, what's it called, they sell for men, or Dollar Shave Club, right? Nobody's gonna go buy Dollar Shave Club from me, even though it's a great product. I'm not being paid for this right now, but I am plugging them. So, anyways, let's kick off episode 2. I am recording this not long after my intro episode of episode 1. Believe me, it's probably a couple hours after. But I am very motivated to get these out and talk, and I have a lot of energy, and I'm so used to staying up at this time of night and being active. My brain is on fire all the time at this time of night. So even though it shouldn't be, but I was on a schedule, where I was up at this time for reasons that I'll dive into later. That I'm more active at this time of night. In the daytime, trust me, I am useless. I'm useless. It's really bad. Other than taking my dog on walks, you'll hear a lot about my dog Cloud. He's great. He's awesome. Other than taking him on walks and playing with him and feeding him and stuff like that, and maybe doing some stuff around the house, and usually going to work. Other than that, I'm useless. I can't get shit done. But, around this time, my brain is firing on all cylinders. And most of the good juices are flowing. So I'm able to really express myself really well from what I'm told by others, and just from personal experience. Like, this time of night is cool. And that might resonate with some of you guys around, that are listening to this, because I know a lot of people that go through the same stuff that I do are all night owls, and they cannot get to bed to save their life until like 4 or 5 in the morning. It's just natural. And I vibe with those people, and I feel like they vibe with me too, because we have this understanding that, these are the hours where, our shit gets done. A majority of, our hobbies are done around this time. A lot of our thinking, a lot of our overthinking, and, a lot of self-evaluation around this time. Definitely. Because there's usually no one around you. You're usually, you're alone with your own thoughts. Unless you're, with friends and stuff like that. But around this time, yeah, you're left to your own devices, and you tend to English, James. You tend to pick at yourself a little bit harder around this time. If you're stressing out, if you're depressed, if you're, if you have anxiety, sleeping issues, or if you're just bored, honestly. I'm sure there are people that don't experience the same things that I talk about, that are just up or that work right now, yeah, there's plenty of people that are working graveyard shifts that are probably listening to this, I would hope, if there's anyone listening to this, that don't experience any of those things, but, they still tend to pick at themselves around this time. So that being said, I'm going to pump these out pretty sporadically. I do have a list of things that I'm going to go off of. I do have like episodes that I have already worked out in my head that have titles, that have, segments, all those kinds of things that, I just feel ready to really get them out there. And I feel confident that when I do get them out there, they're going to be, as high quality as I can get them at this point, even though, that's not saying much because, like I said, I'm in my truck, and I'm pretty sure people think I'm talking to myself. All the sketchy people that walk down my street in my neighborhood, they're probably like, "Oh, that guy's crazy," even though they're cracked out of their minds, at 1:00 in the morning. So, but like I said, to preface this episode, I want to talk about. We're going to talk about coping. And it's a topic that I've wanted to talk about because it's something that people have the most real issue with. Healthy coping is difficult. It is. Just plain and simple, healthy coping is difficult to do. And most people will cope unhealthily because it's easier, it's faster. That instant gratification, everybody wants it. Everybody wants the pain to subside fast because they don't want to go through it anymore, or the annoyance or anything like that. They want that instant, easy fix. It's like being a junkie almost. You just want it fast and quick, and nothing else matters except getting it into your veins and not being able to feel anything. And while sometimes that's okay, in terms of your feelings and your emotions, I'm not condoning going and doing heroin. Trust me, I'm not. But in the long run, that quick fix is always going to hurt you more than coping properly. And I say that because I am the master of coping unhealthily. I am so bad, so terrible at healthy coping mechanisms. I'm horrible, to be honest. And when it comes to coping unhealthily, I'm the king. I'll straight up say it. I am the king. Like, I will self-destruct into a fucking ball of flame and ash in a heartbeat if I'm left to my own devices to do so. If there's nothing else that I can do to cope with what's going on in a positive way. It's a bad habit. And like I said in the previous podcast, if anybody listened, I will not condone any of my bad habits. I won't say that they're great. I won't say that maybe you should try them because let's be honest, you shouldn't. I won't condone any of them. This is the podcast to learn from my mistakes and to keep myself honest and to keep myself honest with you guys so that you don't fall into the same pitfalls and traps that I have, that I still do. This isn't a road that you go down and everything's honky-dory and you're fixed at the end of it. You know what I mean? There's going to be obstacles. You're gonna, for lack of a better term, relapse. I hate using that word because it feels disingenuous to people who actually relapse that have, drug and addiction problems. But emotional relapse is a thing. I just don't like to use that term, but I feel like it works here. So, I mean, if I offend anybody with using that term that, suffers from substance abuse, I'm sorry. I don't mean to, but I feel like it works in this situation, even though I hate using it. I don't want anybody to fall back into bad habits or create bad habits because they're easy. Never. I just don't want that to happen. And you shouldn't want it to happen either. But it is difficult. You know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say more people cope with things in a bad way than they do in a good way more often than not. And I don't feel like that's a bad assumption to make, because everybody that I've ever met that deals with the same issues that I do, whether they're good or bad, tends to cope with things in a far less positive way first than they would in a positive way. And no one's perfect. I'm sure shit not perfect ever. But I think we need to discuss how to, first and foremost, address the situation properly, understand what's going on before we act or react, and try to find a way to deal with it in a positive manner without regressing into self-destructive behavior. And like I said, if there's anything I'm good at, it's self-destructive behavior. It's not a joke. I'm terrible. So, first and foremost, when you have a situation where, let's say, let me think of a really good example. We'll say that you're having a fight with your significant other. The first thing anyone ever wants to do is yell back. It's always, especially when you're getting yelled at, or, you know, you're just angsty and you've been feeling so pent up and everything's coming to a head, and you just want to scream. You just want to yell back. Everybody has that first instinct. Nobody goes into a fight willing to talk things out normally because they're already worked up. It's very rare. Let me just say that. It's very rare. And anyone who does it, you're a godsend. I don't know. I don't understand how you do it, because I sure as hell can't do it. Like, I've tried. There have been plenty of times where I have, but if I was to, give it a number, like a ratio, I would say 90-10, I'm usually just ready to yell back without a second thought. Or I have my argument calmly in my head, mapped out, but my emotions are so tangled up that the only thing that comes out is this audible shriek where I'm just on the defensive right away, trying to make these points that were in my head calm, but audibly coming out, they're a mess. You know what I mean? And sometimes you go straight for the jugular, right at the beginning. You know what I mean? And it's not good. It's just, I'll flat out say it, it's not good. Nobody should ever be like that. And it's difficult to not be like that sometimes. So, and this goes for any kind of fight that you're having, whether it's with your significant other or your family or your friends. Let's say it's your boss, you're having like a disagreement at work or with your coworkers, or, just some random person on the street or in the grocery store. It's universal in terms of, a fight like that. So in order to cope properly, addressing the situation is key, because it brings to light things step by step. You know what I mean? It's breaking down the problem from the sum into its parts. And you're tackling each part one by one to make sure that you give every single part its due diligence in order to solve it. So when you're at step one, nothing should exist in that problem except for step one. And as soon as you take care of step one, step two rears its head. And when it rears its head, that should be the only thing that exists at that moment. And so on and so forth with step 3, 4, however many steps this problem might have. And it's tough because you don't always know how many steps are in this problem. You don't know if there's going to be 1 or 2, and you don't know if there's going to be 6 or 7, and how long they're going to take to solve. You know, you could have 6 or 7 steps, but it takes 5 minutes to solve all of them, and then you can have 1 to 2 steps, but you're taking a day and a half to solve one. You know, it's all a roll of the dice in terms of how you deal with it and what the actual issue is. It's not going to be the same for everybody. I promise you that. So, when it comes down to it, when you're solving this problem, what happens next? Say you solve the problem, but you're still feeling really bad about it. Because not every problem that gets solved is solved emotionally for you. You know what I mean? You still have this residual, almost radiating feeling of emotions, just kind of like, it's like burning embers, like coals. You know, when coals are fully burned out, they're still really hot for a long time. You know, that afterburn is still there. It's with anything emotional in this world. How do you cope with that? But not only how do you cope properly? That is up to interpretation for anybody, because no one's problem is the same. No one deals with the problem the same. Everyone has different coping mechanisms, both bad and good. So let's break down the difference between bad and good in that situation. So say, like I said, the problem is solved, but you still have this radiating burn of emotion after the fact. You know, things aren't back to normal with whoever you fought with, or, you know, whoever else was involved in the situation, or it just might be, you know, your problem, just you alone. What do you do to help calm the anxiety, the stress, you know, the sadness or the anger, the annoyance? What do you do? You know, for some people, it might be exercise. This is in the good section. It might be exercise. It might be, you know, hanging out with your friends. It might be playing video games. It might be writing. You know, it might be podcasting like I'm doing now. It might be gardening. You know, you might be an artist and you might be working on a portrait or a drawing or something like that. You might be cooking something. Cooking's therapeutic. Or cleaning. Very therapeutic. As long as it takes you out of your element enough and you're not doing something that harms you. Those are good coping mechanisms. Or, you know, talking it out with somebody. Talking is always a good coping mechanism, no matter what. Talking things out, whether it's with your friends or a third party that has no dog in the fight, those are always good coping mechanisms. They're never bad, unless you get into another fight about it. Then things become bad. So let's take a look at unhealthy coping mechanism. Things like drinking, very unhealthy. Substances, pretty unhealthy, but I mean, we're all guilty of doing it at some point, just like drinking. Picking another fight, horrible, absolutely horrible. Getting into a physical altercation, absolutely god-awful. Like, don't fucking do that. Like, I don't care how bad your temper is. And this is coming from somebody whose temper, mine, is, like, out of control sometimes. Like, the amount of impulse control that I have is negative. It's on the negative scale. We'll say that much. So, terrible. Don't do it. Don't go out and get into a fucking fight. Please, I'm begging you. I am not condoning that. Physical or verbal. Other unhealthy coping mechanisms, especially if you're in a relationship, we'll say that. Seeking out the attention of another. You guys all know what I mean. Because that is, I'm not going to stress that enough. That is a form of cheating. We all know it. It's petty. It's not okay. And, it does nothing to make the situation better. It feels empty. You shouldn't do that. And, if you do, you got to take a look at yourself and figure that out. Unhealthy coping mechanisms at work. Let's say stealing, that's a big one. Stealing is always terrible. Anything that harms anyone else in order to bring you, and that includes yourself. If it harms yourself, that's anybody. If it harms your family, any friends, pets, random people, that's included in that. Those are all bad coping mechanisms. They're not acceptable. You shouldn't be okay with that. I know we all do it, but you should not make that a habit, and you should not be okay with it. And you should not chalk it up to, well, I was emotional and I was upset, so I did this. No. If there's one thing I've learned from doing that myself personally, it's that never ends well. Never. It will never end well. It will only make the hole inside your stomach bigger. And then you start getting into lying to yourself, lying to other people, your friends, your family, your significant other. You end up lying. And as I stated in the previous podcast, and as I'll state probably many times over, lying will get you nowhere. And sooner or later, every lie that you have ever told yourself or others will come back to bite you in the ass. Every time. Especially when you lie to yourself, as I've been doing for the past easily 20 years. I've lied to myself. And you know what? Look at where I am now. Doing this podcast, making myself accountable for my actions. 20 years too late. Well, not too late, but 20 years down the road, 20 years past due. If this was a library book, bro, come on. Whether it's my emotions or a library book, I'm not going to feel fucking good about it because I took 20 years to fucking hand it back in and be honest about it. Hey guys, sorry, I took this library book 20 years ago when I was 8. Mind if I return it? They're going to be like, bro, really? That's how I feel right now about myself. I'll look in the mirror sometimes and I'll be like, bro, really? Yeah? What lie are you going to tell yourself today? That lie, by the way, is usually that I'm handsome or good looking, that I'm articulate. It's usually one of those lies. But, you just can't. Lying is not a good coping mechanism, ever. It's never going to be. It's probably the worst coping mechanism because it's like a bear trap. You're going to lose something in the process of it, and it's going to hurt. Whether it's now or later, it's going to hurt. And it might not even just hurt you. It'll hurt someone else down the road. Someone you never intended to hurt. Someone you can't live with hurting or can't live with the fact that you hurt them. Or you can't live with the fact that you hurt yourself that much. It's just not okay. We have to learn how to get away from these unhealthy coping mechanisms, as hard as it is, as instantly gratifying as they are in the moment. They're never going to serve you long term. They're just not. The right things are always going to take longer. They're going to take more effort. But in the long run, they are going to serve you so much better physically, mentally, emotionally than any of these quick fixes will ever serve you. You know what I mean? It's just not, they're not comparable. And if we lie to ourselves and say they're comparable, it's just, we're going to set ourselves down a road where it's going to be so hard to come back from that you're just going to want to give up. Or you're just going to keep digging yourself a hole instead of putting down the shovel and being like, fuck this, dude, I got to climb out of this thing. You don't want that. Anyone who loves you doesn't want that for you. Coping is key. It really is key. It's the difference between a good day and a bad day, a good week and a bad week, good years and bad years, like spans of time that you can't even fathom in the long run of like how many years has it been since I felt happy or that I felt accomplished because you kept the ball rolling downhill. And it's not a snowball. It's a ball of shit. Shit rolls downhill. At that point, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like you can wash yourself off and, get back up sooner or later. I would hope you would. But cleaning that much shit off of you, you're going to need a fire hose. And fire hoses hurt, by the way. You ever been sprayed with a fire hose? That shit hurts. It's not pleasant. But neither is being covered in shit. You know what I mean? So why would you... number one, if you can avoid either of those, do it. Avoid them like the fucking plague. Seriously, avoid them like the plague. But if you do end up, getting hit by the shitstorm, you find shelter. Find good shelter quick. And get as much off of it off of you as you can. Because it'll just sit there and accumulate if you let it. You don't want that. None of us want that. So, coping, like I said, is number one key. And it's a topic that most people don't actually address when we're talking about, mental and emotional instability and the issues that it brings. You know what I mean? We don't talk about good coping and bad coping as much as we should. At least I don't feel like we do. We kind of gloss over it and be like, oh, well, why don't you, you do this and that and that. Not everything works for people the same way. You know what I mean? One person's good coping mechanism is not always going to work for the other person. It might work a little bit, but it's never going to work at the same level for good. Bad coping mechanisms work at the same level for pretty much everybody. That's not an exaggeration. I don't feel bad making that assumption because in reality, it's not really an assumption. Bad is bad. Good has many forms, but bad is bad no matter what. You know what I mean? I'm not going to chalk up, one bad deed as not bad because it's less bad than something else. There are levels of bad, but if you're bad, you're bad. That's it. If you're good, there are levels of good. And if you could be good, great, all this kind of stuff. Good is good and bad is bad. Bad works the same across the board. It's fucking bad. Good works in intervals, in arcs. One person's good is not going to be the same as another person's great, and one person's great might not be that good for somebody else. It's about repetition and experimenting and learning what works for you that makes you the happiest. Whether it's long-term, short-term, anything like that. You know what I mean? It's all about that. You have to experiment with yourself and your emotions and what makes you feel alive again, and what makes you hope at the end of the day that things are going to get better, or confident that things are going to get better. Because if you sit there and you drink yourself into a fucking stupor, are you really going to go to bed and be like, oh yeah, tomorrow's going to be great? No, you're going to wake up with a hangover and you're going to be like, why the fuck did I do that? I feel worse today. This is terrible. And we've all done it. I've never woken up the next day after drinking my feelings away and been like, yeah, I feel great. I'm going to do that again tonight. I've been like, oh, this sucks, but I don't know anything else, so I'm going to do it again tonight. And hopefully the next day, I actually feel better. But you never feel better. You absolutely never feel better. Because guess what? You're going to bed with no hope. When you're drunk or under the influence or you did some bad shit, you're never going to go to bed going like, oh man, you know what? Tomorrow might be better. You go to bed being like, ugh. That's it. Just a primal caveman grunt of just, ugh. Because at that point, the apathy is taken over. And I'm sorry, at least in my experience, you don't care whether tomorrow's good or bad. You just want to get through it. And for me, I don't want to just get through things anymore. I've spent a long time just trying to get through. And that's not a good feeling. You want to go to bed hoping or knowing or being confident in the fact that there's some hope for the next day. That you're going to hit the reset button tonight in your sleep. And the next day you're going to be like, you know what? Let's do it again. Come on. Hopefully this is better. Let's make it better. Let's try to make it better. You know, you always want to go into the next day with the best foot forward, ready to cope in a proper way again if something goes bad. Sometimes things might not go bad and you have a good day and there's no reason to cope. And those coping mechanisms become just something that you have fun with and something you enjoy just with no bad feelings attached to it. That's like the dream. That's the godsend. You know what I mean? That's what you should strive for every day, where your coping mechanisms become hobbies, things that you enjoy doing just for the sake of enjoying them, not to cope with the bad feelings. That's always the goal. That's always the goal. But the first step is just getting there. It's being honest with yourself and getting there. And then figuring out, what do I do next? Like I said, you're going to have days where you don't need to cope, where everything seemed to fall into place. And then you're going to have days where not everything fell into place and you're annoyed and something went wrong and you just got to be like, you know what can I do to bring myself out of this funk? And then you're going to have days where you're like, holy hell, like what happened? I need to do something ASAP, or I'm not gonna do too well tonight or tomorrow. You got 3 options. Those are the 3. You got bad, good, and in the middle. And at any point, you can get any 3 of those. You can get 1 in a row, 4 days in a row. Or you can mix match, you can have peaks and valleys, anything like that. That's how that works. You're not going to, you might have a good month where every single day you're just rocking it, killing it. Everything's cool. And then you have a week straight where it's just dog shit. Where it's just so bad that you're like, dude, what the fuck? Like I was doing good. I was doing great. What happened? That's just the, the ups and downs, the long and short of it. But it all starts with coping and how you cope. How you get there is half the battle. I always say, and I took this from a movie. I'm definitely going to say I took this from a movie because I did. And it's from Just Married, Ashton Kutcher, Brittany Murphy. Rest in peace, Brittany Murphy. Um, Tom, Ashton Kutcher's character, is going through, you know, a rough little split after his honeymoon with Brittany Murphy's character. So he goes to his dad's house, and his dad is talking about his experiences with with Tom's mom. And he goes, "Why do you think there are no bad pictures in a photo album? Why?" He goes, "That's the journey. Those bad moments are important because they get you from one happy snapshot to the next. They might not be glorified in the photo album, but they were a part of your journey there, and they're just as important to remember and learn from as those super happy moments. All the time. They might be more important than the happy moments most of the time. Because the journey, that struggle, it's made up of your coping, it's made up of your decisions that you've made, good and bad. It's the struggle. It really is nose to the grindstone, the struggle on how you get to those happy moments. Those are important. And I want people to understand, anyone who's listening to this, that those are important. They're not to be taken for granted, and they're not to be taken lightly. They're tough. They're difficult. You're going to cry. You're going to feel like it might not be worth it. You are. But they really are important. And coping is one of the main players in those areas. It really is. I would say your coping accounts for, I hate doing the ballpark percentages. It's so stupid. But they probably account for like 95%. Your coping accounts for about 95% of how you get through to those happy moments. The ones that you put in the photo album, the ones that you share on Instagram, the ones that you tell people. Like, obviously you're not going to sit there and brag to your friends with your girlfriend about, "Oh, hey, honey, remember that time we fucking fought at a Dodger game?" Or, "I came to visit you and we had a fucking fight, about stupid shit." Nobody tells those stories. I mean, sometimes, if they're funny and you guys have gotten over it and you guys are mutually okay with, expressing it, yeah, you'll break it out at a party or with friends every now and then. But nobody will sit there and explain their fights to their friends or to each other and laugh about them outright almost ever. Because they're tough. They're painful. They really are. But how you get through them and how you cope with them, that leads you to those happy moments that, I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes about, like, that you share with everybody else. Don't take for granted the journey. The journey's super important. Always. So, with coping, it's just, man, I can't stress enough how important it is. Coming from somebody who, like I said, is the master at coping horribly. I've been through the ringer when it comes to coping. I spent, we'll say, a good portion of 2015 drinking almost every day. That's not an exaggeration. For like a good 9 months, I drank nonstop in 2015. I went out every night. I went to the bar. I blew whole paychecks drinking, trying to cope with something that was completely just, it was in my control, but at a certain point it wasn't. Like, I should have just let it go. There was no reason for me to do that. Other than I wanted to feel a different kind of pain that wasn't the pain I was feeling. Anything was better than that. And now that I look back on it, not everything was better than that. You know what I mean? Not at all. It's just stupid decisions that you make in the heat of the moment that lead you to, coping terribly. It's not easy to be rational and be like, okay, I'm going to meditate and do some yoga, or I'm going to play some video games and hopefully this passes. No, it's not always easy. Your first reaction, especially when you're this emotional, I mean, at least for me, like, I get emotional quick, Being rational is not your first, it's not your first go-to. I wish it was. I really wish it was my first go-to. Sometimes it is. Sometimes I'm in a good place where I can be like, okay, I need to be rational about this. I can be rational about this. I'm not so worked up that I'm going to get angry about it or upset or annoyed, and I can deal with this accordingly. There have been plenty of times where I'm like that. I wish it was more. I wish I could really say it was more, but I just honestly can't. Can't sit here and lie and say that I've had a good amount of rational reactions where I kept my head on straight. It would be a lie before God. So it's a roll of the dice sometimes. Sometimes you can control it and sometimes you can't. But when you can, you definitely should. And when you can't, you should definitely at least try and do your best. Because, the devil on your shoulder is always going to make a sweeter deal with you than the angel. It's always going to sound sweeter. It really is. But it's only sweet for a limited amount of time. And then it's just sour and tasteless after that. So it goes from sweet, sour, tasteless. Where, as opposed to the angel, it's almost inverted. But there's no sour. It might be tasteless in the beginning, but at the end, it really does work its way up to sweet. Sometimes. A good majority of the time, it'll work its way up to sweet. Or at least bittersweet to where you can handle it. But that sweet, sour, and then just tasteless or bitter at the end, that doesn't help anybody. It's never going to help anybody. It goes back to the quick fix theory. The instant gratification, the chasing the dragon, you know what I mean? So you do want to make a cognizant effort to cope accordingly and well. Because it's one of the most important decisions you can make when facing traumatic issues or, just emotional problems, even normal everyday problems. You know what I mean? Sometimes they get out of hand. And there's nothing you can do to stop them from getting out of hand. And, coping properly is the key. It always will be. I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. You've heard me say it in the last, 40 minutes. How many times? That's because it's that important. It always will be. And if I can drive that run home, I will. I always will. I'll be completely honest with you guys about that, because it's if there is one thing I've learned, it's that the bad is just not worth it. It's not. Because if the bad was worth it, I wouldn't be sitting here right now doing this. I would be doing a different kind of podcast. Period, bar none. It would still be geared towards helping people, but I wouldn't know much about this in order to talk about it or to feel comfortable talking about it the way I do now, because I made the mistakes. I did the legwork and I made the mistakes. I also did the legwork and made the good choices. I'm still doing the legwork to make the good choices. But right now, I'm trying to not do any more legwork to make the bad decisions. I'm trying to heal from those bad decisions. Just like everybody else listening to this. You want to put your best foot forward every single time. And it's difficult. I know. I get it. But you don't want to keep making the same mistakes every single time, because it's just going to be a merry-go-round of just nonsense. Where do you go? You go in a circle. You don't want to go in a circle. Where does it lead you? Back to square one. The end has to be in sight. And if you do things right, the end will be in sight, but it's not really the end. You know what I mean? It's the end to the start of something. The start of something better. And if you can get there and you can cross that finish line at the end, the race starts all over again. You get another race. But this time you're not in fucking last place. You're not in last place in that race. You start out with a clean slate. You start out being able to do things properly, to make the good decisions because you already made the bad decisions. You get that chance. You know, why wouldn't you want that chance? Why wouldn't you want to do things properly and get that? You know, it's okay to run multiple races. Most people do it in their lifetime. A lot of people will run 2, 3, 4 races. They might run the same race multiple times. Doesn't always have to be a different race. You could lose that race plenty of times and you start back over until you cross the line, the finish line, to get to the next race where you're not in last place again. Until you're at a race that you are in first fucking place the entire time because you learned. You did things right. You didn't make the mistakes. Or you made minimal mistakes that didn't cost you your placing. So, take a minute, reflect on all that. I know it's a lot. I know I talk fast. I know I suck a little bit, but I'm here to be honest and say the things that other people don't want to say, to say the things that you might not want to deal with, but need to deal with. And I'm saying the things that I don't want to deal with, but I need to deal with, or things that I've already dealt with. You know. So, on that note, guys, we're gonna wrap this up. You know, this topic was really one of the ones that I wanted to cover early, because I feel like it's genuinely very important, and it's a good way to start off this entire series. You know, I'm gonna keep going through, you know, the basics until we lead up to the more complex things on how to, you know, how to argue properly, how to, you know, go about things in terms of, like, you know, your personal life that's not coping, to go, you know, just go about your everyday life. You know, how to make the struggle less, because you can do things that aren't considered coping that make your everyday workload, emotionally and mentally and physically, easier to deal with. You know, it's just simple steps. Simple steps that I'm not even that great at yet, but I felt worked for me. You know, when I do put them into action and I have a game plan, even though the universe doesn't always care about your game plan, it's so expansive and ever evolving that your game plan sometimes just don't matter. And I know that sucks to hear. But you gotta adapt, you gotta overcome, and that's just the way it is. You know? So I wanted to get coping and coping mechanisms, good and bad, out of the way and into the light sooner rather than later. So I did it on the second episode, on this one, because it's such a good topic to start off on that it just felt right. You know? So yeah, guys, just take it all in. Take a deep breath. Relax. Do whatever soul searching you need to do. Any kind of thinking, anything like that. Just take your time. Go over anything that I've said if you care to. Hell, re-listen to it if you need to. You know, ask things in the comments below. Anything. I'll do my best to answer truthfully and to the best of my knowledge what I think and feel about it and how it relates to you in terms of what you're asking. I'm always gonna do my best for you guys and for myself, because helping anyone else always helps me in the long run. It always makes me feel better, and I always learn something. That's the number one goal, is for me to learn something all the time, no matter what I'm doing. And if you guys teach me something, shit, I'm forever grateful. So, on that note, we're going to end the podcast here. Dragged on long enough, but I just felt it was important to really get this one out here as soon as humanly possible. Because who knows? Maybe this topic on coping completely changes the way somebody deals with stuff for the better. And you see your life improving little by little, sometimes instantly. And that's a good feeling. And it's a really good way to end the podcast, because, like I said, I want every podcast to end on a really good note, something positive. And my positive message at the end of this is, it's going to be okay. At the end of the day, if you want it to be okay, it's going to be okay. You got to want it. And if you want it, it's going to just reward you time and time again. Your efforts are always going to be rewarded if you're honest about it and you want it. If you want it bad enough, you can have anything in this world that you want. It's true. Even the worst people, they want something bad enough, they get it. They work towards it, they get it. Sometimes they don't deserve it based on what they're like, but I mean, hey, they earned it because they worked for it. And if you're a good person, you should be able to work at it and earn it and get whatever the hell you want. You're worthy of it. As a good person, you're worthy of it. And you should get that. You should. And I want you guys to have it. I want myself to have it. I'm not saying I'm the best person in the world, but I genuinely, for the most part, believe that I'm a good person. And I'll work for what I want, for what I need. And that one day I'll get it. And you will too. There's always something good right around the corner, as long as you believe there is. It's true. Speak it into existence and it will happen. For the most part. It might deviate a little bit from what you want, but if it does, that's the universe telling you that this is what's better for you. And you got to put trust in that. You really do. Also, listen to your parents. Your parents usually got it right. And I know some people don't have parents, or, they don't have great relationships with their parents, and that's okay. But if it's not your parents, listen to the person closest to you that's older than you, that's been through a lot. Because they know. There's a reason they're at an advanced age, because they survived a lot of shit. And they know, and they learned. And they got a wealth of wisdom. Even though you might think that you're young and you're smart and you got all this brain power, they're way older than you. They've been through the ringer. No matter if things are different now than they were back then. But they've got the knowledge. And it's important to take that from them when they offer it. And to seek that out. And they're more than willing to give it to you. You know what I mean? They're more than willing because they want to talk and be heard just as bad as we do. You know, they got a wealth of knowledge to share with us. And if you're smart about it, you can learn so much. And you can, at the end of the day, get what you want if you put it into practice properly. So that's my positive message at the end of this podcast. Guys, I really appreciate you listening to this and taking time out of your busy schedules. If you did, it just means the world to me. It does. From someone who feels lost and on a daily basis and just wants to make some sense of it for himself and for others. And it really means a lot if you took time out of your day to listen and to try to better yourself and hopefully help me better myself as well. Because you guys are important. Whoever's listening, you're important. And I know that you're important, and I love you guys. I do. Because without you, I don't think I would have a purpose. I don't. Other than to be me and, you know, be happy and healthy, but I genuinely feel like helping anyone who needs it is my calling. No matter how I do it. And this is just a good step to start. So, thank you. I hope you guys have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Keep your chins up. Come at me with anything that you need, and I'll do my best to be there for you guys because I love you. So, take care, guys. Bye.